Everyone, welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are watching online. Once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to jump right into this tonight, picking up where we left off last week. And for those of you that might not be aware, you might just be tuning in. At this time, we're in the parenting manual of the Peaceful Solution Character Education program. And if you haven't seen the other classes that we went through, I know there's a lot of people watching these classes through government organizations that they've encouraged you to watch them to help fix any situations or problems that you might be having with your family at this time. A lot of this curricula that you see here, in fact, all of the curricula that you see in the parenting manual comes from our junior high series and also our Building Moral Excellence unit, but it goes much further than that, back to the early learning and the first, second, third grade, our elementary curricula. All of these things being put together to help bring about what is being taught to parents, but really should have been taught at a very young age, a much younger age. And in fact, it's kind of unfair what life does to us sometimes when we think about how society we get caught into this situation where we really don't know how to make decisions, but society holds us to a standard without teaching us how to adhere to that standard. So if we can help in any way, please feel free to. You can message us if you're watching on Facebook. If you're watching on the website for the Peaceful Solution, you can email us at info@peacefulsolution.org. And once again, if you're, I know we have a lot of classes taking place on the southern border of Texas. If you're having situations where you're needing Spanish, we also have those. We have a couple Spanish teachers, really decent Spanish teachers, that not only understand the language, but also the culture. So very important that you understand that these things are very open to you. And for those of you that are watching overseas, whether you're watching in Africa or Europe, let us know if you're looking for teachers, because we have some that we can help you with. They will be more than readily able to help you get through this curriculum, and we'll also make sure that you have the books. So don't let anything stop you from educating yourself in moral character. It's in educating the generations to come is how we're going to make the world a better place. It's the lack of education that has us where we're at today, and until we make a change, we're going to continue to see this downward spiral. So that's why it's so important for parents. We have to educate ourselves and also our children. And it's not even that you have to do it as much as you just have to provide the avenue for them to be part of it. If you'll open up the avenue, we have a lot of teachers here from the headquarters of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. Just open the doors and we will get you the teachers. We will get you the curricula. All you have to do is just provide the means to where they can actually attend the class, whether it be virtual or in person. But virtual, going around the world, it's been made easy. We learned that it was easy due to COVID. That helped put that, impress it upon the minds of many people. So if you're interested in having classes, and your class doesn't have to be 30 people. If you have five people, 4 people, 3 people, 2 people, don't worry about it. Let us know that you're interested, and we have a lot of teachers that are trained and ready to go. So please let us know, and we'll be more than glad to assist you in anything we can do. Now, continuing on here in the parenting manual, if you look back here to lesson plan 2, page 2B, that's where we're going to pick up. We left off in procedure 6, and remember we were explaining this is a little bit different if you're accustomed to our junior high series or even our elementary series, and also the Building Moral Excellence unit. You usually get the procedures, and you complete pages with those procedures, or there might be some page numbers that are left out, but showing you need to complete that procedure before you get to the next page, or for example, you might have cover pages 100 through 103, and then the next procedure says start on page 107, and you have 104, 105, 106 that needs to be covered before you get to that procedure. The parenting manual, however, is very different. And you're going to see tonight we have 3 procedures on one page. One will start at the top, one's going to be in the middle, and one will be at the bottom. So it's really important. And this program for the parents is really set up for a lot of discussion. And I do want to warn you tonight, and yes, this curricula is created to really get to the deep root of a problem. Tonight, you're going to hear language that is not normally used in a peaceful solution class, but it was created in this booklet, in this book, in this format to be taught to parents. Obviously, parents is, you got a mom, you got a dad. That's a man and a woman, biological, man and woman. That's what produces a child. There's no other way on earth to do it. That's the only way to do it. And it will help you to understand some things, but like I said, it's kind of strong in language, and yes, these classes, you're going to have parents, but we're talking about mature parents. There should be a lot of maturity in these classes. The things, the words that we're going to, and the topics actually tonight we're going to discuss requires maturity and to see the seriousness of why these things should even be addressed. Sometimes, sadly, it's appalling, makes you want to vomit to have to mention some things. But if you don't mention them, that tree never falls and no one ever hears it. You have to make mention of these things to make people aware. And just to show you, because I got a couple of messages asking me about herpes, people getting herpes from kissing babies, or babies getting the herpes from people kissing them. And as I said, just Google it. You'll find endless cases. And so I wanted to show you, I just did this right before I come up here. This was March 9, 2012. Baby dies of herpes in ritual circumcision by Orthodox Jew. Very important to note in reading the article, the circumcision was perfectly fine. It was a healthy thing they did for the baby, but the rabbi had herpes himself, and due to the ritual they perform on the baby after the circumcision, which has nothing to do with the circumcision, the baby contracted herpes. Here you see, this is February 25th of 2020. 4 New York babies get herpes from Jewish circumcision rite in past 6 months. Once again, if you read the articles, it will explain to you the circumcision was perfectly healthy. It was what the rabbi who had herpes did to the child after circumcising it that led to the child's getting herpes. Here you see newborn. This one is July 20th, 2017. I tried to make sure to get these years apart so you know it's not the same article just being regurgitated. Newborn baby contracts illness and dies likely from a visitor's kiss. So here you have a newborn that contracted herpes, and it says most parents know that babies are not born with fully developed immune systems, and as such, newborns are more susceptible to illness and infection than adults around them. That's why the babies, it really takes over them. And then you have here, mom, Facebook warning, kissing baby led to herpes. And this was from the UK. A UK mom trying to get the word out about what occurred to her infant. Somebody that had herpes kissed her child. Child got herpes. Here you have another. Toddler almost died from contracting herpes from a kiss. This one was the 22nd of November 2017. And once again, these are babies that they're defenseless. And of course, everybody sees the baby and they're like, oh, I just got to kiss it. No. I tell you, I've got plenty of children myself. And, you know, one thing that's always been a rule for everyone, and I grew up this way. No one ever come up and kissed you. That was it. No, you didn't have people that just come up and started kissing all over you. That was never done. You know, it's we're going to get into some things tonight. And there's a lot of scientific proof in society today. And I just want to lead this up because of what we're going to get into because we're going to get into some mistakes in parenting. And if you're a parent, you're going to make mistakes. There's not one parent in this world today that has never made a mistake. We have all made mistakes, and then you can make bad choices by repeating the mistake without educating yourself. But it's a scientific proof. There's scientific proof out there that a person can progress to do something that can hurt them. In fact, there's one study out there called the 12 Steps of Fornication. And it shows how a person actually can go through doing certain activities and leads to, as we define in the Peaceful Solution, as being promiscuous. Now, promiscuity in itself has proven to lead to a lot of sexually transmitted diseases. And if you remember our classes from the self-control unit, and I think we also mentioned them in the respect unit concerning self-respect, the majority of people in the United States, citizens in the United States, contracting sexually transmitted diseases are from the ages of 15 to 19. So that's a lot of young people, very young people. I want you to think about this. When does a child usually get out of diapers? 1.5, 2 years old, as soon as you can potty train them. A 15-year-old child, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, they're only 13 years removed from diapers. And I know people think at 13 and 14 and 15 they can take on the world, but there's a whole world they don't know anything about that's full of death, disease, and destruction. And it's just waiting for them. And it's a proven fact in society today that not having these conversations with our children is leading to record high sexually transmitted diseases. And once again, this is not from step 1 to step 12. This is progression. And yes, the music of today's society plays a role. The movies play a role. The people who are around them that allow the influence, the peer pressure, and the conformity. All of these things play a role. You know, the internet's at an all-time high with the most negative things you could ever imagine. But, you know, here in the state of Texas, you have to say that you're 18. That way they know it. You know, and you just click. You know, they're moving up a little bit right now. I read the other day where if a site asks you if you're 18, it will actually scan your face into a database. And that's what they're starting to do. And, of course, a lot of that's being done with airports and so forth, going into governmental buildings. But that way they can supposedly prove that you're 18. You know, taking your word for it. You know, there's a lot of things that you have to be aware of as a parent because the danger and the poison is lurking from every corner. We'll keep those things in mind as we get into this because we're going to get into some pretty in-depth, disgusting topics, but they have to be talked about. So here, procedure 6, it says, ask students, what do all positive, effective parents have in common? So you want them to ponder that. And you can have students that are old enough to have children, don't necessarily mean they have children, but they're there to educate them, and you want to get those wheels turning in their mind. Paraphrase the first paragraph on page 12, emphasize and expound on the 3 common traits. Explain that positive parenting does not stop there. These traits are only the foundation. They will learn about many other traits and skills and knowledge essential to positive parenting. So looking over here to page 12, now once again, you're going to see we're going to have 3 procedures here on page 12 alone. It'll carry over into page 13. But at the very top, we left off with this, reading the first sentence here on the top of page 12. Without the teaching of moral character education, it would be impossible to raise positive, moral children in today's world. And think about that. Let that set into your mind, because if we don't do this, it's impossible to accomplish the goal of actually bringing forth a society of peace, a society where no one dies from cancer, heart disease, sexually transmitted diseases, and all of these other things that we spend billions of dollars trying to figure out how to stop it. It literally can be as simple as teaching positive moral character. And I challenge anyone that says it's not possible. You know, I want you to consider, how do you contract these diseases? How do these diseases come about? What brings forth this way of death? And if you don't do what it takes to bring it forth, how can you possibly continue it? It would stop on its own. It's like a faucet that's running with water. If you turn the faucet off, the water will stop running. But if you just keep turning on more faucets and hoping that, well, it'll go away somewhere, no, eventually it's going to consume everything in its way. But continuing on here with what the procedure instructs us to do, it says, although modern-day parenting is filled with new challenges that our ancestors did not have, the elements of positive, effective parenting have remained basically the same since the beginning of time. You know, and have the discussion with your class, and actually, because you never know what age group you're going to have. We've had classes where grandparents have come in with their children who were there with their grandchildren 3 generations before, and you'll get a lot of differentiation in between what the grandparent grew up with, what the parent grew up with, and then what the child who's coming to the class, who's seeking to be a parent or going to be a parent soon. They all have a very different outlook on what it was like growing up. And when you think about what's in today's society, I would dare say I have teenage children, and I bet you there's a lot of things that teenage children have in society that I don't know anything about. I've seen things that by talking to people all around the world, actually, that devices that I didn't even know existed, ways of doing things. It's mind-blowing. I mean, when I was growing up, a laptop was not even something that was normal. It was a desktop, and it was a really big desktop, actually. And that was something you went to school, and, all it had was a little green dot that went on it, and everything was in green. And that was pretty much all it was. It was a very basic computer system, and now the world has changed so fast where an infinite amount of knowledge is put into the hands of a child. Well, being an effective parent means, applying rules, but you also have to consider what do you put in the hand of a child. Because you can say, well, I gave my child that, but I set rules to it. Okay, well, does that thing you gave your child have the potential to take its life? Anything can take a child's life. No, not really. No, not anything. There's lots of things that don't take the life of a child. And we're talking about from a mental standpoint. Because the first mistake you can make as a parent is giving your child something so they can occupy their time to keep them out of your hair. That's not even a mistake. That's just I can't even say what kind of choice it is, but it's a poor choice. Can't use that word. We're going to use some words tonight, but not that word. It's a very bad choice. The mistake is not being educated where society failed to do it. That's a bad choice. But, making these, a lot of people want to define them as mistakes. And I want to remind you once again here, on page 129 of the Building Moral Excellence unit, we said, we wanted to discuss it, and we did go into detail. Another question of the day: does maintaining a positive character mean I should never make a mistake? And I want to stress to you once again that this is something that's a proven fact, and when implemented, and write that beside of this section right here, because we're going to cover the word, and you're going to see mistake. Even across the page, you're going to see what mistakes are. But it says, before this question can be answered, let's define exactly what is meant by mistake. The word mistake can generally be defined as something that one does unintentionally because of a lack of understanding, perception, or knowledge. In many cases, however, the word mistake is used to describe what is actually a deliberate and intentional choice rather than an act done out of ignorance. The bad choice is the lack of education, and that allows for people to make decisions without that knowledge that, it can be a mistake. But if you're going to bring forth a child into the world, you should educate yourself in everything it takes to nurture and to upbring that child and to bring it about in a safe environment that's surrounded by morality. And remember, those are rules, and those rules keep us safe. And when a child looks at rules as being bad, the rules just take all the fun out of everything. It's like playing Russian roulette. It's so fun until the winner, whoever the winner is, it's a game to die for. And that's what life is like. One thing in life that we're faced with, and I just want to get through this before we carry on to the rest of this. One thing it's hard for a lot of people to see is they're not a person that can escape everything. We're not a person that we can do whatever we want to, and the graveyard's full of dead people, but not me. I'm never going there. When we have to face our mortality, it can be a little bit more real to us. But you don't want to see a child, and go online and read about these children right now dying of cancer, born with their organs outside of their bodies, literally half a leg, the arm didn't grow. Look at the things that children who, not their fault, and why did this take place? Oh, it was a genetic mutation. Well, what caused the genetic mutation? Why did these things take place? And the doctors that's supposed to have all this wisdom still can't even tell you what acid reflux, why it takes place, or irritable bowel syndrome, or any of these other things. They can't even tell you what causes that. and they're going to solve cancer. So obviously, if you look at it, and I'm not condemning any physician or a hospital or telling someone that it's not important to go, I'm just telling you, don't expect someone to save you from every disease, because they honestly don't know themselves, and they'll tell you that. Just ask them, they'll tell you. So it's up to us as parents to try to prevent, through education, as much negativity as possible. It's still going to be up to a child to make decisions, but we're talking about a parent with newborns in the very beginning. So effective parenting here, continuing on here in the middle of the sentence, have remained basically the same since the beginning of time. This is this teaching of morality. Regardless of the times in which we live and the challenges that face us, effective parents have three common traits. One, they have positive moral character. That means they have been educated or they're in the process of educating themselves. That's why we offer the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program to anyone who desires. And I encourage you, send us a message tonight. Send us an email tonight. If you want a class started, send us the messages. We'll get you set up with your classes. There's a lot, especially if you know CPS. We have a lot of CPS classes going on. The Peaceful Solution has been proved to reunite families and to build situations that were thought impossible. And even CPS officers are bragging about how well this is working in families. And it's very important. And you don't have to let it get to that point. You don't have to let it get to the point where a government official is now involved in what's going on in your family. It can be fixed long beforehand. In fact, you can even get to the point where it never gets out of control. But it requires education and knowing how to do things. That's what we all go through. It's not any different for any of us. And the next point here, it says they understand the tremendous responsibility they have toward their children. Yes, it's not have a child and then get it out of my hair. Shut it up. I got a child, now I need a nanny. That's what I need. I need someone that takes care of the child. I'm the mom. I did my job. I gave birth. I'm the dad. Well, don't ask me. I already done my job too. There's nothing wrong with having people help. There's nothing wrong with having your mom show you or having your dad show you how to do stuff as a parent or a grandparent. In fact, that's encouraged for us to be willing to learn from our parents and our grandparents, and from people who actually can offer us positive moral education. That's important. And the responsibility didn't start at the birth of the child. The responsibility, if you're taught through the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, starts with the action that could create the child. That's where it starts, in knowing that you're committing an action that can bring forth life. And if you're not willing to support a life that could come into the world, then you shouldn't be committing the action itself. Refrain from it. Because if you're going to go through certain things, you have to live with the consequences, of these things. Well, I say consequences. It's not a negative thing to have a child. The reward are the consequences, and that's really for the child, whether the child's going to have positive parents. And it also says here, they prepare their minds and hearts to nurture, protect, teach, and guide their children always from a moral perspective. And you can write in your notes there, chapter 2 of the character unit. Once again, that's where we talked about all in the family. We talked about verbal abuse, physical abuse. We're going to get into a little bit more of that tonight. But once again, we go into great detail about how they can break down a family, and there's certain things that can tear a family apart from within. We talked about how words can hurt more than a physical punch. And we even have statistics in there showing these things. So that was the second chapter of the character unit. And then continuing on, it says, the all-important task of parenting is really about you developing a positive moral character and then teaching your child or children how to do the same. So as a parent, it really starts with you. It starts with the parents, both parents being involved in educating the child. And yes, we live in a very busy society. We live in a society where, most parents both of them are out working these days, but it's also your responsibility, if you send your child to a school or wherever you send your child, make sure you're sending them to a place that teaches positive moral character. Make sure you thoroughly understand where you're sending your child to be educated. You know, there's a lot of things being posted about books being allowed into school systems right now that don't promote family values, that are teaching children that things that are once considered common sense. You know, you don't know if you're a boy or a girl until you're 18. So take the time and figure it out yourself. You know, I think, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was born, they figured it out the day I was born. And it even showed on my birth certificate. And it wasn't rocket science. And, you know, and it seems laughable, but I tell you, I have met people that will argue that point with you to no end. Now, I want you to think about what you're doing to your child if it's born a boy, but you really wanted a girl. Or if it's born a girl, but you really wanted a boy. Well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. You know, for thousands of years, it was accepted what the child was because you could see it right there in front of you. Even if you need to see to believe, it's right there for you. And people will still question it. And due to a lot of really bad decisions people have made, there are some, you could call it mutations, so to speak, where people have committed certain acts and it's really destroying the makeup of a child. And you can get into a lot of different things. I'm not here to criticize anyone in any which way, shape, or form, but when we talk about raising a child from a positive environment, think about the things that are tearing society apart. Think about if it brings disease, mental illness. If it can cause any of these things, then it's negative character. We should guard against our children going through these things. So here, and I'll show you what I do to my book. This is the book I use for teaching. I put the procedure right beside everything that we're going to do. And the reason I do that with procedure writing is because it helps you to know you need to go back to the procedure. And you'll learn all of the pages we discussed with the self-control and the character and all that eventually gets so burnt into your mind you don't. I've had the books where you cover them with so many notes and then you go to teach and you can't figure out what your notes even meant. So, you know, nothing wrong with putting notes down, but make sure you can put them from a teaching standpoint because you're going to have discussions. And a lot of times your class is going to guide your discussion. They're going to bring up certain topics or certain things, and they're going to teach you some things too, I guarantee you. You're going to have classes that you're going to hear things that just blows your mind. And different cultures, the way people view life differently, economic status. All of these things will give different points of view, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone needs to start with moral character education. I don't care what there is in society that you face, it all starts with that basic principle, as we said, with that foundation of teaching positive moral education. Parents getting educated so they're not making decisions without the education, saying it's a mistake. Mistakes can lead to a lifetime of pure hell for your child if you allow it to take place. What you allow to take place in a day can take years to try to fix and might not even get it fixed. You know, and it's really that scary, but it is possible. Looking back over here to Lesson Plan 2, page 2B, at Procedure 7, it says, read the first paragraph under the heading, Training Never Hurt Anyone, on page 12. Emphasize that effective parenting begins with being responsible and notice being trained. And if you remember back, and I should have wrote it down, I don't remember where it's at, but it's in the responsibility unit, and I think we also we mentioned it twice. It might be in the self-control unit too, or the respect unit. I'll look it up, and we'll bring it, unless someone knows where this is at, where even a teacher can be trained. And I know it's in the responsibility. It might be the respect unit. We mentioned it twice in the junior high series. But it's putting there that you're never to the point where you can't be taught something. Even a leader can be trained. I think we say that in the Building Moral Excellence unit. And that's in Chapter 4. But continuing on here, it says, allow students to write down some things they have been trained to do. For example, driving a car, their job, cooking, all require some form of training. And if you've ever ate food from somebody that has never been trained to cook, then you can experience that too, and you take people's word that they can cook until you eat it. Maybe Catan can tell you about what all-in-one is one day. We went somewhere to teach the Peaceful Solution, and we had some men that told us, "Oh, don't worry, we can cook." And we watched them throw ingredients. They were going outside. Now we were in the Caribbean, so there was herbs everywhere. And every 5 seconds, it's like they were going out, grabbing things and throwing it in the pot. And we're like, "Where are you getting all this stuff from?" There was herbs everywhere. And by the time it was done, it was like the pot was full of, it must have been 30 ingredients. And when we asked them what it was called, it was like, "Oh, it's all in one." Like they made up the name really quickly. And they did a great job trying. But I noticed they didn't eat it either, just to be fair. But I tell you what, some great friends, really great men. And they tried very hard. They really did. But one of the men at the end of it, he came up, he goes, "I have to tell you, I can't cook." I was like, I'd have never guessed. But they tried very hard. But here, training never hurt anyone. Continuing on here, it says, to be a great parent, you must be responsible. And just as with any other responsibility, being well trained is an important part of being successful. So once again, if we ever do something, we want to be successful. We want to accomplish whatever it is we started out to do. Whenever you go to do anything, there's an end result of what you hope to see. And when you have a child, of course, you hope to see your child become successful. And success isn't measured by a law degree or a doctor degree or, some kind of really nice job as a CEO, making lots of money. That's not success at all. That's financial success, but that's not the success that the Peaceful Solution is speaking of. Success is being able to teach your child morality, and your child continue on teaching their children morality, and expanding this out, teaching others morality, teaching moral character education. And when I say moral character education, just basically teaching people not only how to make the right choice, but why it's so important to make the right choice, why it's so important to put forth so much effort to create the situation. And, in doing this, the Peaceful Solution, in just doing these very simple things of the training aspect, so to speak, you could eliminate divorce. You could eliminate the arguments, the hatred that takes place where people who once cared about each other, now they hate each other, to the point to where, as the author of the Peaceful Solution said one time, it's love at first sight and hate at first fight. But sometimes the children are the ones that fall victim the most. And I've talked to a lot of people. My parents were together up until my father died, so I don't understand what it's like to go through this. But I've talked to a lot of people that their parents divorced when they were growing up. And they tell me it's one of the hardest things that they ever went through. That they were born and grew up in a family where everybody seemed like they cared, and all of a sudden the parents became just like harsh enemies toward each other. And as a child, they didn't know how to deal with that. They did not know how to process how these two people that brought me into this world, now they hate each other. And now they're fighting over me, but they're fighting over me because they hate each other. They're not really fighting over me for me. They just hate each other. And when you think about what that does, I've talked to a lot of people who have been through that, and I've never had anyone say anything positive about that experience. But once again, we're talking about from a child's perspective. What does the child go through? Well, why should parenting be any different here? We're talking about this being trained. Think about how many things you have been trained to do and write some of them down below. And depending on what a person's been through, you can have 10 people in your class and you're going to have 10 completely different experiences. So it's important, have them write it down and really discuss what their experiences are. What have they been trained to do? How successful were they? I've heard people say that were part of a divorce as a child that I don't ever want to be in that situation, ever. Well, I always ask them, and I've had quite a few people tell me that, and I always ask them, how do you know how to prevent it? If you don't want to be caught in that same situation, how do you know how to prevent that from taking place? What should you do? What can you do? You can't foresee the future. Remember, as we talked about, you don't need a crystal ball to see into the future. You just need to merely look at the decisions you're making today. We've even put that on a shirt before. We passed out thousands of shirts that said that. And that's really the whole sum of it. If we look at what we're doing today, we're building. Kind of like those 12 steps I mentioned to begin with that can lead to a very negative outcome. But we're building things. Remember, we're developing. And we can either develop something that's really nice. If you look at 2 plots of land, one time the author of The Peaceful Solution had an incredible mind. And he could paint pictures in people's minds when teaching that was amazing. And one of the things we did, and we did this for a long time, and we put it on the side of our cargo trailers, we put it on the side of our motorhomes when we were traveling, and it was a city. And it was split right down the center. One side was just as beautiful as you could ever imagine. It just looked like a place you'd want to be. The other side looked like nuclear war had taken place. And it was entitled, Your Children, Your Choice. And that's really what it becomes. It's our choice whether we lead our children onto this way of life that could just be full of really joyous times and rewards. But it takes training to do that. You know, if you look at the training, we live close to an Air Force base that houses planes that drop nuclear bombs. They're capable of that. And if you live in this area, you see the training constantly. The American money that's spent on training the military in case of a war is tremendous. So why are we not spending as much money training parents, training children how to be peaceful? You know, you think about it, obviously we have a mindset as a country that war brings peace. That's why our symbol for our country has an olive branch in one hand and arrows in the other. And I'll never forget when President Bush said that you have to have enough arrows in your hand to make sure you have peace. In other words, you got to have peace through force. Well, if you're a parent, you'll realize you have to train your child how to do something, and you're never going to force your child to do anything. The same way your parents didn't force you. You would go, oh, yeah, absolutely, I'll be in bed by 9. And then by 10:30, up the window goes, out the window you go, and off doing your thing. Living your life. Just make sure you get back home before mom and dad wake up. You know, and that's what occurs when you try to do it through force. They're still going to get it done until we see why and we understand why. And this training that we continually have to take into ourselves, we don't see why it's so important that we don't do it any other way. You know, and you never want to get to the point to where someone is suffering tremendously before you go, I should have done it differently. You know, with that in mind, have that discussion with them. Once again, training never hurts, based on positive moral character education with the mindset of being responsible for an infant. So that's really what you want to focus it on there. And you're going to hear a lot of things they went through as a child, because that's what we reflect on in teaching our children is what we went through as a child ourselves. Some people had really great childhoods. Some people had childhoods they'd like to forget, you know, and it really, it's almost like in society, your parents can't watch you 24/7. Me and my 2 brothers, I have an older brother and a younger brother, we were guarded, like really heavily guarded. I don't mean with guards and machine guns, but we never went anywhere really without our parents. That was pretty much it. We all grew up around our house. And I had a great childhood. I wouldn't change anything. But I had friends that went out, spent a lot of time with other people, and a lot of really bad things occurred to them from a physical standpoint when they were my age. And I noticed the ones that went through that I was friends with, that I knew what they went through, every one of them ended up in severe drug addiction, suicide. I haven't talked to them in a long time, the ones that are still alive, so don't know how life turned out. But I remember their life went very different than mine did, extremely different. Doesn't mean you can't go out and have experiences as long as they're positive experiences. But there's a lot of negativity out there. So with that in mind, just keep in mind, if you're not going to train your child to do something, somebody else will train your child to do something. So looking back over to lesson plan 2, 2B, procedure 7 is what we just covered. Now looking at procedure 8, allow volunteers to read the next 2 paragraphs on pages 12 and 13. Parenting requires training. Stress that just because people have the ability to have children does not mean they are ready to be parents. Discuss some basic things that a new parent would need to know. Ask, what are some things you had learned as a parent that you did not know before? And you're looking back over here to procedure 8 on page 12. So you have 2 paragraphs. The second paragraph goes on to page 13. You're going to have 2 volunteers, one read each paragraph. And it says, many of us become parents and are unprepared for the responsibilities that face us. The fact of the matter is, since parenting has become increasingly difficult in our immoral society, we need all the training we can get. Speaking of positive training, by learning how to become positive parents, we can acquire the skills to raise children who are moral, respectful, and caring toward themselves. Remember self-respect. If you don't have that in your mind, write that down as chapter 2 of the respect unit. That's where we're taught we have to respect ourselves first before we will respect anyone else. So caring and toward themselves and others. Whether your child is in the womb, and remember back to the very beginning, we covered that a child can learn even from within the womb. It's a scientific study that's been proven. It's at the very beginning of this book. Or you already have a household of children ranging in ages from newborn to teenagers. It's not too late to begin developing positive character traits and teaching your children to do the same. So it's very important that all of this is encouraged, but notice the key word is training. Training, developing. And when we went through the character unit, onto the acceptance, the self-control, the respect, the responsibility unit, then we got into the BME, you heard the word developing multiple times. And we compared it to developing as in real estate, where you build it up, but we were talking about a character. And even when we talked about the foundational parts, there was all of us from William to Catan to David. We all talked about certain situations. We compared it to building houses and other things, trying to get a mindset into where if you neglect the very beginning and you think it's not important, we'll figure it out as you get, we'll figure that out as we get along. It's kind of like those simple bookshelves you buy from Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, or whatever other store you want to throw in there. They're so simple. That looks so nice on the box. You get it and you dump out a million parts, it seems like. And, you got it and you're trying to put it together. Nothing's working. You've used vocabulary that you probably should have never said in front of everybody else around you. And then 3 hours later, it's like, well, where's those instructions at? Let me get the instructions. You don't get to do that with a child. You really need to know what the right thing to do from the beginning is. So think about that, because it's something that we can't very easily, let's hit restart. Doesn't work that way. Once you bring that life into the world, you're responsible for it. You're responsible for not just the food, but also the education, the environment that surrounds that child. It's great to be around people where you have a positive environment, actually. And it's great to, that's really priceless. If you think about being, and a lot of people, when they go to move, they'll look at school systems, they'll look at crime rates, they'll look at all of these things. And if you can get your child into an atmosphere, an environment that is always promoting positive character or positive character education and corrects, when I say I mean corrects, if someone does something that's negative, hey, they point that out to them. Hey, this, you shouldn't do that, and this is why you shouldn't do it. From an educational standpoint, you've accomplished a lot, because as the author once said, and he was taking a quote from Japan, it takes a village to raise a child. And it truly does. It takes a lot of people being involved. And as a parent, you should never get upset if someone corrects your child for your lack of training. That's part of being trained as a parent too, and our education continuing. You should be thankful if somebody corrects your child for doing something that's wrong. Looking back here on page lesson plan 2B, because we're going into procedure 9 now. Here we have page 13. Hold on to your spot there. But once again, notice that this has a lot of interaction and discussion in between you and your students. You're going to read this, and then you're going to have discussion. They're supposed to mention some things that they did not know before, and have them just come up with anything. A lot of people don't realize you have to rotate a baby in the bed. A lot of people don't realize, there's all sorts of things. You should never feed a child this. I'm not going to say what this is, because heaven knows there'll be 1,000 doctors out there that say, well, yeah, you shouldn't give your child that thing that bees make. But there's also a scientific fact that you can do it. But be mindful what you give your child. Doesn't mean if your child can eat something that, oh, my child's eating solid now, let's give it a ribeye steak. Well, no, do things within means. Educate yourself on what is proper. And be mindful that you do educate yourself. Don't listen to some old wise fable. Like when you, got to burn, put mayonnaise on it. I've seen that before too in my life, and I'm thinking, man, I'm not a doctor, but I know you don't put something that's oil-based on a burn. That doesn't make sense. But that was an old wise thing from where I grew up. That's what they told you to do, and didn't make much sense. Didn't help the situation, made it worse. But we learned. I was a bystander, but I learned. So did the person that got burned. They really learned. And that still gets mentioned to this day. But here in Procedure 2B, Procedure 9, Lesson Plan 2B, Procedure 9, explain that when parents lack training in positive moral character, they can become abusive to their children, so that they have the potential to be abusive to their children. Read the first 2 paragraphs under Acknowledging Mistakes, Finding Solutions on pages 13 and 14. Briefly discuss the various forms of abuse and a few examples of each. And once again, briefly, because this is the section that I'm going to get into, and I'm sure William's going to cover some more of this, because you can't say enough about this. And once again, I want to stress, there's going to be things that you're going to hear me say in this part, and I'm sure in the next class that William's going to teach, words that really kind of going to turn your stomach when you think about what's being said, but it's extremely important that it's said. It's extremely important that the point is gotten across. There's no reason to sugarcoat it and hope you got the point. It's something that needs to be said for what it is, and then acknowledged for what it is. So acknowledging mistakes, finding solutions. It says an important step in your training to become a better, more effective parent is to acknowledge that there are areas you need to improve in, because even the very best parents can make mistakes. I don't know anyone that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people around the world. I've never met anyone yet that doesn't acknowledge to making a mistake as a parent, one form, fashion, or another. The question becomes, do we eliminate those mistakes? If we did something, it was wrong, did we educate ourselves, find out what was wrong? And then, how much time, think about it, how much time does it take to fix that mistake? It's kind of like when we learned this with traveling in motorhomes. And I'll give you an idea, compare this to like a mistake in your child's life. One time we were going through, we needed gas. I think we were going through Tennessee into Virginia, because we were going to Washington, D.C. And someone said, just take the next exit. There's usually gas stations around here. And it was probably me that said that, because I usually was the first motorhome up front. And we took an exit that had no entry ramp back on, and you had to drive 20 miles in the middle of nowhere. There was no gas station, to turn around and come back 20 miles to get back on the interstate so we could go find gas. And you think about that, and yeah, that was a really bad choice. We didn't run out of gas or diesel. We did finally get to the place, but just taking the first exit's not the smartest idea. Well, the same thing with your child. If you're going to do something and you make a mistake, learn from it. Don't do it twice, because, it took us 20 miles one way, 20 miles back to fix what I did, and everybody else followed, because they thought I knew what I was doing. They questioned me after that, and I don't blame them. I questioned myself after that. But think about with your child, how long does it take to repair the bad choice? Sometimes you might be able to fix it pretty quickly. Sometimes it could drag out for months or even years to fix that bad choice, that mistake from lack of education. Kind of hard to say it's a mistake when we're in these classes, because we're seeking education. And that's what we're really looking to do. But it's still possible to make a mistake. And that's important to realize. It is still possible to make mistakes. We can all do it. After we're educated and we know what's right and wrong, then it becomes a bad choice. So once again, we're talking about mistakes here, and remember what a mistake is. Continuing on here, it says, the many stresses of modern day living, coupled with a lack of experience in parenting, can lead you to say or do things you might regret for years to come. The mistakes, notice mistakes in parentheses there, in parenting that we are referring to do not include verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, nor do they include being negligent toward the needs of a child. You know, it's just a sad fact of life as a parent, I guess, that you're going to have to work and spend your money on somebody else. The things you want becomes irrelevant to when you have children. What they need really comes to focus. That comes in. That's the most important thing. You'll have to start prioritizing. These are things where we're not going to cover in this section, but as a parent who's having a child, and I don't care how much money you think you have, you should have a budget. And you should figure out, because if you've never done it before, you need to get an idea what you're going to spend on things that you're not used to buying. You know, you can't always go out and get the latest, greatest iPhone or the latest, greatest this or the latest, greatest that. No, you have a responsibility for a life that you now have to take care of. But once again, these are things this is part of the education and the training we're talking about. But once again, these, if you neglect, sexually abuse, emotionally abuse, physically abuse, verbally abuse, notice it says these types of abuses are not mistakes. Underline that word, not, circle it, put arrows toward it, make it flash in your book if you can, because we're not going to get by with saying I didn't know. If you don't want to be beaten or burned with cigarettes or touched in an inappropriate way or called certain names, derogatory names, if you don't want to be abused, then you already know that your child doesn't want to be abused either. Notice it says they are willful and heinous violations of the innocence and trust of a child. And we haven't got to the building moral excellence in the workplace yet, but right beside of that trust of a child, write down trust must be earned. Trust is not like respect. Respect is freely given. Trust must be earned. But as your child, when you have a child and you nurture your child and you take care of it, your child will naturally trust you because you've done the things which need to be done. And, so there was a scientific study. They were comparing the trust of a child to the trust of a dog. And they said a dog, it's been proven you can kick your dog, and I'm not telling anyone to do this because it's not right. It's very immoral. Or you can let your dog go without food. You can let your dog go without water. And when you get home, that dog is still shaking its tail and so glad to see you. Child won't do that. If you kick your child, hit your child, starve your child, they're not going to be that way because they have a more developed mind. And they're going to lose trust. And if you ever lose the trust of your children, you're in one hell of a battle now because you're responsible for developing that child. It's impossible to develop someone that doesn't trust you. It's a task that you're going to have to go back through and rebuild that trust again. And it can be very difficult to do. So the first thing to consider is don't do anything to lose that trust. But continuing on here, if you or anyone else in your family have committed any of these abuses, then seek counsel immediately and determine in your mind never to repeat these abusive behaviors again. Note the following examples of these abuses and the effects they produce. Here you see the very first one is verbal abuse. Yelling, scolding, demeaning, insulting, ridiculing, or otherwise attacking a child with words are forms of verbal abuse. Research has found that children who are verbally abused have many of the same problems as victims of physical abuse. Verbal abuse, children suffer from anger management issues, violent behavior, depression, and other disorders common in physically abused children. It's we're going to have a class this Saturday, and I seen a video one of the teachers are going to use, and I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to give it away. It's a really great video. And so everybody should come for this class because it's really one of the best videos I've seen in a long time. It's very short, but it's to the point. And it shows the effects of words. That's all I'll say, and how powerful they are from a scientific standpoint. So make sure you make that class and see it, because it's something that after he shows it, we'll talk about. We'll probably show it in this class too, so it gets shown around the world. But it's a really great video to show just how powerful words are. And then looking down here to physical abuse. Childhood physical abuse involves physical injury or maltreatment of a child, which includes hitting, punching, slapping, kicking, shaking, burning, or other ways of inflicting pain, not giving a child food to eat, denying a child of medical attention, and giving a child drugs and alcohol. All of those things would be considered negative character. Physical abuse can have short and long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects. Short-term effects include physical injury and brain damage. And it's pretty common to see what's called shaken baby syndrome, where a person just doesn't know how to deal with a child. When a child is crying, you got to think a child's in a crib and is crying. And some people can get so frustrated, either due to the lack of training that was given to them, they haven't developed patience, and they will shake the baby, hoping that will cause the baby to shut up. But I don't know about you, but if I was crying for something and somebody starts shaking me violently, that's not going to calm me down. When you think about, part of having a baby is figuring out how to communicate with the baby. That's part of the trust building. The child has a problem, you solve it, it helps build trust. Or you at least fix what it's needing, or the lack thereof. But some people, due to this lack of education, never been properly taught themselves, most likely were abused themselves, this is what they get into. And I've seen, and you can research this, it's online, where people have shaken babies so hard, they actually detach the brain from the cerebral spine. And you think about how violent that is. But of course you have babies that, things are still solidifying. And that's a lot of violence that goes on in that. But once again, looking at the person and saying you shouldn't have done that, you're a murderer, now you're going to prison. Society that's teaching morality would literally find out why the person did it, what was missing from the training of this person, and how do we prevent this from taking place again. Locking somebody up and putting them in a shell for 30 years for committing a crime with no education in morality is not helping anyone. Justification is what they call it. Well, justification is, ask India and Pakistan right now how justification is working. Ask Palestine and Israel how justification is working. Ask Sudan and Southern Sudan. Ask Iran. Ask Iraq. Ask Yemen. It's endless. You could just keep naming places. Justification doesn't help. People keep dying. So we're talking about fixing situations. Yes, not having this mindset that people don't need, when you committed this crime, you don't deserve the right to even live yourself. Always consider what started the situation. Finishing this out, it says, children can become withdrawn, sad, experience difficulty sleeping and eating, become irritable and aggressive toward their peers or younger siblings, have a lack of confidence and self-esteem, and start using alcohol or other illicit substances. The long-term effects include difficulties forming and maintaining healthy relationships, and a tendency to be victimized or abused in future relationships. Notice children deserve love and respect, not abuse. So not only do they deserve respect, they deserve love, which is having care, concern, and compassion. That's what really respect is. They deserve that, not abuse. We're going to stop at this point because we're going to get into the emotional abuse. And then William, next class, is going to get into the sexual abuse side of it. And once again, like I said, in the peaceful solution, a lot of people ask us, does the peaceful solution teach sexual education? We teach education. We're never going to have pictures for you to look at. We're never going to have a film to show you. In fact, William will get into what voyeurism is next class. There's a lot of people that become addicted to these things by watching other things. It's a huge money-making industry, and the Peaceful Solution does not promote it, but we do believe in education, and you can be educated. Well, I need to see a video to be educated. Well, how long have videos been around? 100 years? From before that, people were educated without these very provocative videos. So it is possible. And just further proof, looking back, sexually transmitted diseases have skyrocketed in the last 100 years, along with these educational videos and this form of sexual education. So if it was working so well, the numbers should have plummeted by now. But it's not working too well. And that's just a fact. So we're going to stop right there. We're still in the middle of procedure 9. In the middle of procedure 9. So William will start back again. We're going to leave off on the very top of page 14. The next class will be May the 11th, this Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Don't forget, those of you that are here, make sure you attend that Saturday class. It's going to be really great. At this time, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.